stories.
Your freedom.
The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome, everybody. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. We're here for the next 2 hours taking your calls, 855-4-SCHIFF, 855-4-SCHIFF. A lot of stuff going on today, a lot to talk about. Hopefully we have an opportunity to get it all in. First of all, I got to start with the markets. The markets are a big story. The Dow Jones down about 250 points right now. That's on the back of a similar decline yesterday. In fact, we were down closer to 300 at one point this morning. The catalyst on the day, the Greeks. The Greeks now, earlier this morning, came out and said, we don't want the deal. We got to put it to a referendum vote. So everything is now back up in the air. Maybe the Greeks are going to turn this down. You know, I said before, I don't think even the Greeks can repay their debts with a 50% haircut. Maybe they're trying to get an even better deal. Who knows? But it's all back in play. And so we're unraveling a lot of the gains that we had late last week. And, of course, I think yesterday's catalyst for the sell-off was the bankruptcy of MF Global. You know, you got a company with $6 billion in leverage bets on sovereign debt from foreign European nations. And, of course, you know, MF Global is not the only company that has that has gambled. I mean, so everybody's going down today. J.P. Morgan's down about 5.5%. Morgan Stanley down 8%. These are all off the lows. They were down a lot more. Goldman Sachs off 4%. Bank of America down 4%. You know, one of the good things about the MF Global bankruptcy is that at least they're not too big to fail. At least we can let them fail. But, you know, other banks are doing the same thing. And so if this happens to a J.P. Morgan or a Morgan Stanley, you know, the bailout's going to have to come because, hey, they're too big to fail. And the question is, you know, what made it so easy for MF Global to get all levered up like they did? It was the Fed. Money was so cheap, so they gambled. They borrowed a lot of money. Of course, that was their plan of growth. They were growing not because of traditional banking services or money management services, but MF Global was trying to grow based on proprietary trading, based on taking a lot of risk with leveraged shareholder money. And the shareholders are suffering. You know, if they bought stock in MF Global, when that stock, I guess, came out, it was first trading in July of 2007. I guess it was an IPO back then, and the shares were trading around $30. They got as high as $32 in December of 2007. Of course, that was before the financial crisis. And then the shares dropped as low as $1.90 at December of 2008. They had a pretty big rally with all the financials, went back up to about almost $10. And now, you know, they're probably zero. The stock is halted. Who knows if there's going to be anything left over for the shareholders when this bankruptcy is resolved. But again, it shows you how risky it is to get in on some of these IPOs, especially in the finance industry, which is why I've been, you know, advising people to stand clear of the financial sector in general, because I think they take a lot of risk with shareholder money. And if you're the shareholder, it's your money that's on the line. The managers, they seem to get paid either way. Win, lose, or draw, they get big bonuses. Of course, they get bigger bonuses if they win, but they still manage to get bonuses if they lose. So it's kind of heads, management wins, tails, the shareholders or the taxpayers in many cases lose. But what's going on in the market today? Classic risk-off type of day. Everything is down. All stocks, all markets, all around the world. Gold's down big, too, down over $20. Silver down. Gold stocks getting hammered down about 3%. The dollar, of course, way up. In fact, the dollar index, which was below 75 on Friday, is back at 77.5. We've had a huge rally in the dollar, certainly in part because of the big intervention. I think they said it was a record intervention in Japan, maybe $50 billion that they had to buy. You got to feel sorry for the Japanese taxpayers having to get stuck with that. I mean, that's probably that one bailout in one day is pretty much how much is the Greek bailout? $100 billion. I mean, half of that just yesterday in one day by Japan. bailing out the U.S., and, of course, it's an ongoing commitment because Japan, they said, look, we're going to keep on printing yen. We're going to keep on making sure that our currency doesn't go up. So the bailout for the United States is costing Japan a lot more than the bailout for Greece is going to cost Europe. And, of course, this is an ongoing commitment by the Japanese. Of course, it's not just the Japanese. Everybody is assisting in the bailout of the U.S. Eventually, of course, they're going to realize that it's an open-ended, never-ending, ever-escalating commitment, and they will eventually walk away, but they haven't come to their senses yet. But looking at the euro all the way back down to 136. Remember, we were at 142. 142 on Friday, all the way back down to 136. These are huge moves, and everybody is looking at this tiny economy, Greece, and it's all going off of what happens in Greece. But the Aussie dollar, remember, it was back above 107 on Friday. It's barely holding on to 103. These are huge moves in the Forex markets. You know, I'm sure there's going to be some more big announcements because I'm sure a lot of people are losing money trading this market. This is not an easy market to trade. There is tremendous volatility, and I'm sure there are a lot of banks losing money on what's going on. The Treasury market, take a look over there. Again, Treasury yields plunging, bond prices surging. The yield on the 30-year all the way back down to 3.0. The 10-year all the way back down to 2.0. The yield on the 10-year last week had risen back up to 2.4. So 2.4 to 2 in less than a week. I mean, these are enormous moves in a very, very short period of time. You don't often see this kind of volatility. So who knows what's coming up? But this is certainly going to be more problematic. You know, we got economic news out today. The ISM numbers came out pretty weak, above 50, 50.7, but anything below 50 indicates a contraction. The manufacturing sector was a lot softer than the prior month, and I think both imports and exports declined, showing a declined level of economic activity. None of it is boding well for the so-called recovery that a lot of people think that we're having. Anyway, I want to move on again a little bit, talk about one of my favorite subjects these days, Michael Moore, who finally actually came out and admitted that he is in the 1%. So he's out of the closet now. He's admitted it, but he's excusing it, right? He's saying, yes, I'm in the 1%, but, hey, I'm not really in the 1% because, you know, I don't invest my money. First of all, he said that when he got his first $3 million, you know, he went to his accountant and he told his accountant, I want to pay as much taxes as possible. I don't want you to use any deductions or exemptions. I'm just happy to pay. Yeah, there's no way I believe he told his accountant that. If anybody, I wonder if, in fact, if Michael Moore's accountant actually can remember that, he can come out, because I don't think anyone would think of that. I mean, why would he even need an accountant, right? I mean, if you're just going to pay the maximum and not take advantage of any deductions, hey, you can do that yourself. Just use the 1040 EZ form. I mean, nobody goes to accountant unless they're trying to find a way to reduce their taxes. I can't be that dumb. Anyway, we're going to continue this and take your calls after the break. You're listening to the Peter Schiff Show at Schiff Radio. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. Remember, lots to talk about today, but right now, talking about Michael Moore. You know, I haven't heard back from Anderson Cooper whether or not Michael Moore is willing to accept my challenge to have a little bit of a mini debate with me on Anderson Cooper 360. Of course, I've invited Michael Moore on this show. He's refused our invitation. But in any event, so he's claiming that when he sold his first movie, I think it was Roger and Me, he got a check for $3 million. And he immediately went to an accountant and told the accountant, I want you to figure out my taxes, but don't take any of the deductions. I want to pay the maximum. Which, I don't believe that for a second, not even 1 second. In fact, if Michael Moore's accountant is out there, step forward, because any accountant would have to remember that, right? I mean, if somebody comes to you and says, don't try to find any deductions for me, just pay me the maximum because I want to contribute, you would remember that conversation, right? In fact, as I just said, if that's the case, why do you go to an accountant? You don't need an accountant if you're just going to pay. It's real simple. Just fill out the 1040 EZ. I mean, if you don't want any deductions, if you're just going to pay the maximum, no one has to go to an accountant for that. People go to accountants because they want to pay less. They pay the accountant because they're afraid if they don't pay them, they're going to end up they're going to end up paying more than they really owe, right? And that's why people hire accountants. If you don't care about that, there is absolutely no reason to even go to an accountant. It makes no sense whatsoever, which is how you know that Michael Moore is lying. But then another thing he said he did is he used some money to buy a house and buy a car, and, and he gave a little to charity, but then he took the rest of it and he just put it in a bank with a really, really low rate of interest. I mean, maybe he looked around and he asked because he didn't want to earn interest, because he thinks making money off of money is a bad idea. So then he shopped around for whatever bank had the lowest rate of interest, and then he put his money there. Of course, I'm sure he could have found a checking account that paid 0 interest, so he could have done that, or he could have just asked for $100 bills and shoved them under his mattress if he wanted to make sure he didn't make any money on his money. Because he's saying he's not like the other 1%, because he doesn't try to make money off of money. That somehow that's a bad thing. Oh, really? That's a bad thing, right? So the person that bought his movie, that gave him the $3 million, they were trying to make money. If they weren't trying to make a profit, they wouldn't have paid him $3 million for his movie. In fact, what about all the theater owners that bought the prints and that showed the movies? Did they do it out of charity? No, they did it to make a buck. If people weren't trying to make a profit, nobody would ever see Michael Moore's movies, because there'd be nobody with a movie theater, because the people don't operate these theaters out of the goodness of their hearts. They're trying to make money. To say that people that invest are bad people, look at all the people that are watching Michael Moore's movies on computers, on laptops, on iPads. I mean, what if everybody did what Michael Moore did? Michael Moore said he swears he would never buy any stock. That's a bad thing. Well, what if none of the venture capitalists were there to fund Microsoft, or to fund Apple, or any of these companies that have come out? What if everybody took Michael Moore's position that it's evil, it's just greedy capitalists who buy stocks? Would any of these companies exist? No. How could they exist? Would all of that we get the most out of it life wouldn't exist if people followed Michael Moore's example? Yeah, he's a good guy because he doesn't want to invest and help grow the economy. He doesn't want to provide any seed capital for companies that are growing. He doesn't want to make any loans. In fact, if he puts his money in a bank, what does he think the bank theoretically is supposed to do with that money? They pay him interest. They have to make loans. But no, he doesn't want that. He is just full of it, absolutely full of it. In fact, I've read, I don't know for sure, that he's lying about the fact that he's never bought stocks. I think there's information out there that he may have had a pretty decent stock portfolio, but I don't know for sure. But I just think the whole concept that he would even say that buying stocks is bad, that making business loans. People are starting companies all the time. What if everybody had Michael Moore's attitude? No, I don't loan money to entrepreneurs. That's evil. That would make me greedy. People shouldn't try to make money off of money. So according to Michael Moore, nobody should be able to get a loan to do anything, right? Everybody should have to fund their businesses without any loans, without any investors, all on their own. Because if anybody tries to make money off of money, which is what loans or equity is, then that's somehow evil and immoral. I mean, the whole thing is absolutely nonsense. Anyway, I've got some sound. Apparently, here Michael Moore was at Occupy Portland talking about how he's demanding that the richest Americans should give back $1 million. Like the richest Americans. He says the 400 richest Americans should each write a check to the government for an extra $1 million. I mean, first of all, that's peanuts. That's an extra $400 million. I mean, that little bit of money, they already likely pay taxes many, many times that extra $1 million. The whole concept is nonsense. But at least someone in the crowd points out, hey, what about Michael Moore? How much is Michael going to cough up? Yeah, he has no problem asking people richer than him to write big checks, but he's pretty rich. He's richer than a lot of people. Well, how big is the check that Michael Moore is going to write? Anyway, here's cut number 5.
What he just said was that the richest 400, we know about them, right?
Yep.
They have more wealth than 150 million Americans combined. All right? 400 people. And this man, Thomas, is requesting, and I think it's a very simple request, would each of these 400 just give back $1 million each?
How about $1 million of your
Thomas,
50 million? How about $1 million of your 50 million?
they spend that on lunch.
So according to Michael Moore, he's poor because he only has $50 million, and the real rich people spend $50 million on lunch, which, of course, they don't do. But the point is, yes, a billionaire is very rich compared to Michael Moore. But Michael Moore is just as rich compared to the people in that crowd. And it's the height of hypocrisy for him to demand that a billionaire contribute extra money and not him, when the billionaire is already contributing plenty of money, and that's a totally another point. But anyway, here's the rest of that exchange. He continues to ignore people in the audience who are demanding that Michael Moore, eat some of his own cooking here. Here, cut number 6.
How much your own $50 million are you going to donate to Occupy PDX? You don't want to answer that? Aren't you part of the 1%? Aren't you part of the 1%? Make way for the 1%. $50 million Michael Moore. Here he comes. Michael, we love you. Make way for the 1%. Hey, Michael, you flying the corporate jet back? Huh? Your own private jet? Who's paying you? 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 We need Michael.
So, anyway, he can't answer those questions. I mean, there's nothing that bothers me more than hypocrisy, and Michael Moore personifies it. In fact, maybe that's why he's so overweight, because he's full of hypocrisy. That's why he's the size that he is. Anyway, let me go and take some calls. We got interesting guests coming up. I wonder if we have time for any of these calls, but I'll start with Casper calling from Malaysia. Casper, you're on.
Good evening, Peter. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for taking my call. And first of all, thanks for giving this Michael Moore guy a body tackle. Forget about sweet talking him into your studio. Just take him out, because he's beyond repair, all right?
Hey, I got it. Hey, Casper, can you hold on? Because I didn't get to the calls. I had a lot to talk about. Still do. We haven't even talked about Herman Cain and sexual harassment. There's so much stuff to talk about. But if you can hold on, I can take you after my guest. I got an interesting guest coming up who's, had a huge battle with the IRS. So it's a great story, unfortunate story. But we're going to talk about that when we come back. And then everybody who's on hold, I will take you guys as soon as we come back at the top of the next hour. Hey, you're listening to the Peter Schiff Show here on SchiffRadio.com. We are back. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. Hey, apparently our guest is held up a bit, so I will continue talking with Casper from Malaysia. Casper, you're back. Is Casper there? Well, apparently maybe he didn't hold on. I wish he had, because he called from, far away. But I'll try to move on to the next guest, Brian, calling from Washington. Brian, you're on. Is Brian there? I don't know. Maybe all the callers, it looks like they're still on the phone, but maybe they dropped out. I'll try the last one. Carl from Newtown, Connecticut. Carl, are you there? Carl there? Well, I don't know. I guess we lost all of our calls. I don't know. Anyway, we've got a guest coming on, and I'll hold off telling about him, because who knows? I mean, maybe he's having technical problems, so I'll just move on and talk about other things. If anybody wants to call in, all of the guests apparently hung up without my producers letting me know. It's 855-4-SCHIFF if anyone wants to call back, 855-4-SCHIFF. There's the big news story overnight, prior to what's going on with Greece and all over the news, is the sexual harassment allegations against Herman Cain. And, of course, the sexual harassment allegedly took place many, many years ago. I think it's about 15 years ago, while he was the head of the Restaurant Association. One or maybe more women might have alleged that there was sexual harassment. Of course, part of the problem with all these sexual harassment laws, and I'd like to see this get more play in the media, is how ridiculous the laws are, how easy it is for somebody to just allege sexual harassment and collect a bunch of money. You can easily extort money out of your employer simply by accusing them falsely of sexual harassment, because it's very hard to prove it. In many cases, there's no witnesses. It's your word against somebody else's. And as I said many times on this show, the law is overwhelmingly tilted in favor of an employee and against an employer. Anyway, I'm going to talk a lot more about the Herman Cain situation and employment law, sexual harassment law at length when the show at the top of the hour. But my guest has finally arrived, so we're going to begin this topic now. His name is William O'Callahan, and the reason he's on the show, and Bill O'Callahan is a 63-year-old resident of Clearwater, Florida. He is in the financial services industry, and he has just gone through, and I'm not sure it's over yet, I read the story about him, a 20-year-plus battle with the IRS that has just ended with the IRS seizing his house and kicking him and his longtime girlfriend out of the house. And, the ultimate irony here is while the government is bending over backwards to try to keep people in their homes when they really shouldn't be there, people who are leveraged to the hilt, who borrowed all this money, took out second loans, used home equity loans to buy cars, take vacations. The government is doing everything they can to keep these people in their homes. Meanwhile, William O'Callahan owned his home free and clear, and they seized the house. He had no mortgage on it at all, and now it's up on the auction block. The IRS is selling this house, helping to add to the glut of properties on the market. They're trying to keep all these highly leveraged homes off the market, and here they've seized his home. He didn't owe a dime on it. It's up for sale. He's been paying taxes. In fact, they're taxing William O'Callahan to help keep other people in their homes while they're seizing his home and put it on the market. I mean, maybe does Barack Obama not have any idea what the IRS is doing? Anyway, William, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back. Tell me, now the IRS says you owe $2 million, or is it more than that?
They say I owe them $2 million. It's been disputed for almost 30 years, and I don't believe I owe them a penny, nor does a lot of other people.
Well, how did it start? I mean, how long has it been $2 million, or is it $2 million because of 20 years of interest and penalties?
It's interest and penalties only. This has nothing to do with taxes. And when it started, Peter, was 1981 and 82. They claim I had a tax liability for about $60,000, and in 83 I had a tax loss of about $110,000. So between all 3 years, I actually had a tax credit.
Are you allowed to carry back your losses?
You were in those days.
All right. So what's the problem then? Why don't you? As far as that's concerned, then they owe you, right?
They owe me. But here's what the real problem has been, and it's been on for a long period of time. The situation is that regardless of where it started, it's all air. There's nothing here that relates to taxes. It's assessments and it's penalties.
Oh, I know that, the interest and penalty. But first, so this is a dispute over 1981 and 1982. Since then, have you paid all the taxes that you owe, since that year?
Not only have I paid those taxes, I've been paying taxes for 45 plus years. I've been a filer. This is not about avoiding taxes. I pay my taxes. It's nothing to do with that at all.
Now, does the interest accumulate at an annual rate of 10%?
I'm not really sure because we have never got a complete assessment from anybody at the IRS as to how they come to these numbers.
Well, I mean, it's $2 million now. How much did you owe a couple of years ago, according to the IRS?
Well, according to the IRS, the $2 million lien has been on my house since 1994, I believe, or 1995.
Well,
it has really never changed.
Well, but then where's the interest and penalties? If you owe $2 million in 1994, you'd probably owe $10 million by now at the rate they charge interest. I mean, it's almost like loan sharks.
They haven't updated any of those things, and the $2 million is a question mark also, and the question mark becomes that there was a trainee. This is a result of a trainee at the IRS back in 1989. She claimed she did an audit of me. I was not involved in the audit, nor was my accountant, nor was any third-party independent verification. And she claimed she did an audit, and in the audit she decided she would strip my tax returns. She would also file a negligence penalty of over $400,000 for not returning her phone calls.
$400,000?
That's correct.
Because you didn't return her phone calls?
That's correct. There's a negligence penalty. She assessed me $400,000, and her only comeback to that was he didn't return his phone calls.
How many phone calls?
She claims she called me 13 times in 13 months, and she also claims she even talked to my ex-wife, which was virtually impossible because my ex-wife had already been an ex for 10-plus years.
Well, did you get 13 messages from her?
No, I never got any messages from her.
Yeah, so she probably just made it up. Maybe I could try to get the phone records. But so this lien has been on your house for how long?
17 years.
So when did they finally seize it and put it up for sale?
Well, in 2009, they filed a foreclosure action against me, and I battled that in court for the last 2 years. However, we never really had our day in court. What happened is that the day in court never happened. The judge refused to give me a jury trial, and he only did it on a summary judgment motion. Mm-hmm. The summary judgment motion was filed in front of a magistrate judge who was a former IRS guy.
And summary judgment in favor of the IRS?
All the time.
Were you in an actual court, or were you in tax court?
I was in the United States Middle District of Florida in a real court, and I think the judge in that court was just hoodwinked by the conduct of the IRS, and he just didn't want to deal with it.
So they gave the IRS a summary judgment that you owe the $2 million, or
yes.
And then when did you leave your house?
I left the house on September 1st.
September 1st, and so where are you living now?
Well, I'm currently living not too far away with a friend, and we're staying there.
Now, did you have a mortgage on this property at some point?
No. Actually, yes, I did have a mortgage at one point on the property, yes.
But you paid it off even though there was an IRS lien on the property?
That was paid off years back, yes.
Yeah. And so your property is it for sale?
Well, I haven't seen it on their auction block yet, but allegedly that's what they're intending to do with it.
What do you think they're going to put it on the market for?
I have no real idea because, they're so inconsistent with what they say. I really don't have a...
But let's say they sold the house. I mean, what do you think the house is worth?
Well, it's a depressed market right now, even though it's on a beach and it's a nice location. It's a depressed market. I mean, maybe the house to somebody is worth $700,000, $800,000, but it might only sell for $300,000 or $400,000.
Yeah, and if it only sells for $300,000, you're still going to owe the IRS $1.7 million, according to them.
No.
What happened?
That's over. It's what's known as an in rem. I beat the IRS on 2 different occasions on the taxes that are at issue here. And what happens is a lien on the property survives a bankruptcy. So even though the judge has ruled I have no personal liability for any taxes, the in rem, it's called in rem.
Okay, so the property settles your debt. They can't go for anything beyond this property.
That's right.
And Florida, you're in the state of Florida. The homestead laws of Florida don't protect that residence from the IRS?
Well, they've completely ignored the homestead law, and the IRS says that the homestead law is subject to them, not the reverse.
Oh, so sovereignty of the federal government over the states. Anyway, we're going to continue with your story. Right when we come back, we got a quick break. We'll be back. This is the Peter Schiff Show here at SchiffRadio.com. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com talking with William O'Callaghan about his saga with the Internal Revenue Service. And, Bill, it must be really frustrating because I'm sure there are a lot of people that are living on your street that have huge mortgages and aren't even making their payments, yet they're still in their house. You paid off your house in full, and you're the one that gets kicked out.
It's very frustrating. It's very, very frustrating, and it's worse that you feel like the IRS stole your house. They didn't take it legally. They stole your house. And that's what's happened here.
Yeah, and ironically, if you'd had a $400,000 or $500,000 mortgage, you'd still be there. In fact, if you just simply stopped making your mortgage payment, the IRS wouldn't touch the property because you'd be so underwater. There'd be no equity there, and so they would just leave you alone. You could stay there indefinitely.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah, and I'm sure that this has really taken a toll over the last 20, 25 years, having this $2 million anvil dangling over your head. But, how has this really affected, your life, your business life, your personal life, this battle with the IRS?
Well, it's dramatically affected. And, Peter, let's get this clear. I've tried to straighten this out numerous times. I've made offers and compromises. I gave the IRS $113,500 back in 1997 on an offer and compromise to settle this $50,000 alleged debt, and they rejected that.
How much did they claim you owed in total back then, though?
$2 million. $2 million.
Oh, it was still.
Again, this is all phantom income. It's all phantom stuff.
But what year was that $2 million?
The $2 million that they filed the tax lien was in 1995.
So it started in 1995, and it was $2 million based on the income that the taxes you didn't pay in '81, which was $50,000.
That's right. The $50,000 in taxes turned into assessments and negligent penalties and interest of $2 million.
Yeah. Now, does the IRS dispute the loss that you had in 1983 or that big loss that you have, or do they acknowledge that loss was legit?
No, they never dispute anything, but they don't give me the opportunity to challenge it because they have so many loopholes in the law, and they said they gave me proper notice, which they never gave me, and because I didn't challenge it in that 90-day period, I never had the right to go to tax court.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they seized your house. Have you ever been inside a court? Did you ever get before a judge or a jury?
I have not. Nope.
All right. So the U.S. government, despite the fact that we have a Constitution, we have Fourth and Fifth Amendments that protect property from unreasonable seizure, that say the government can't take your property without a hearing, they have taken your property that you own free and clear, and you have never had a hearing.
That's correct. But even further on that, the IRS and the judges and our federal system gives the presumption of correctness of the records to the government in all cases. That's part of their standard language. It's in all the cases with the DOJ or the IRS. The government judges always rule in favor of the government for the correctness of the records, which I proved that the records were totally inaccurate and incomplete. In motions I put together, they completely ignored them.
Yeah, it is a terrible system that we have. I mean, the U.S. government takes property today the same way Attila the Hun used to take property. There is no legal protections. The government simply takes whatever they want. I mean, you got to read some of my dad's books. I mean, he's in jail still right now regarding his battle with the IRS. So at least you still have your freedom. They took your house, but he's been in jail for many, many years. Of course, he took an opposite approach than you. I mean, he actually wasn't paying taxes and was trying to fight the legality of it, but you tried to abide by all their bogus rules. You paid all these taxes, and they still took your house.
Yeah, I think it's even worse than that, Peter, and let me tell you why it's worse than that, because I never had a chance to appear in court. I had a chance to hire an expert in recent time. That expert was the former deputy director for 29 years of the IRS to evaluate the liens and the position the IRS has taken. He wrote a document making it absolutely crystal clear that the IRS took this house totally illegally and invalidly.
And this guy was a former IRS agent saying, in his opinion, what they were doing was illegal.
He was the former deputy director, the number 2 man at the IRS.
So you have one of the highest guys that ever worked there says what they're doing is wrong. So who's to say he's wrong and the guy that's still at the IRS is right, especially when he probably was higher up than the person who's making these allegations?
That's an absolute good point, Peter. And the case here is that the government uses this guy because he left the IRS in, I believe, 2007 as an expert witness in cases against people.
So this is the witness that the government uses when it's convenient for them to use. And the same guy is testifying in your favor that they're wrong, and yet they could. I mean, it's such a double standard. I mean, it's obvious that they don't care about justice. For some reason, This agent just wanted to take your house, and the government let them do it. I hear all these commercials all the time, on the radio, settle your tax debt for 5 cents on the dollar, 10 cents on the dollar. So obviously, this happens. What was so unique? What do you think was the problem with your case that the IRS refused to settle it?
Oh, I think there was a couple things. One, I think the fact that I beat them twice in court, and I think there was a vendetta behind the scenes with a couple people at the Department of Justice who were annoyed with me when I filed a bankruptcy in 1999 in the Middle District of Florida. The IRS was the only creditor because I filed an adversary proceeding because they wouldn't allow me to go to court. I won that case, and the judge scolded the U.S. attorney or the Justice Department attorney for misconduct and so forth. And she had threatened me a number of times that she would turn it into a criminal case, and she would get the federal investigators involved, and she would do this and do that, and it never happened. And she went home with her tail between her legs, and I think she's been behind the scenes egging this thing on.
Yeah. Well, now right now though, now that they've taken the property, there are no more liens. Your credit, you don't have anything on your credit history that reflects this anymore.
I don't know. I haven't pulled my credit report, but the situation that you bring up about credit, one of the things that happened to me, and of course, at one time I was a partner in a broker-dealer operation in a small investment banking company, and as you know, everyone checks you out when you're doing a deal, and when they would find a $2 million lien by the IRS, everybody would back away. They would say, Bill, listen, we'd love to do business with you. We want to do this, but we don't want the IRS in here subpoenaing our books and records. And I lost $1 million worth of business through that.
So you lost a lot more money than the value of the house they seized because it screwed up your ability to earn a living. And of course, if you would have earned more money, you'd have paid even more taxes. So the IRS shot themselves in the foot as well as you in the head. But anyway, look, I really feel for your pain. I'm sorry this happened to you, but unfortunately, this is the nature of the country we now live in. This needs to be changed. Anyway, thanks for coming on the show. I wish you the best of luck in the future. Anyway, everybody else, stick around. We've got a full hour coming up on the Peter Schiff Show. I will be taking your calls when we get back, so don't go away. Welcome, everybody. This is Peter Schiff. Hour 2 of the Peter Schiff Show is underway now. We're taking calls 855-4-SCHIFF. The market has been trying to rally over the past half hour or so. The rally is failing. The Dow is headed back down in the red by 235 points. Still off the lows, but it looks like we could be headed for new lows on the day soon. All the markets around the world under pressure. Commodities, oil back down below 92, almost back down to $91 a barrel, but still oil holding up a lot better than a lot of people would have thought. The dollar's still strong, dollar index above 77. Bond price is very, very strong as people are worrying about an outright default coming in Greece if the Greeks reject this deal in a referendum. I'm also seeing some stories coming across about the IMF saying volunteering to get involved. That's all we need is the IMF. But anyway, I want to continue on, and then I'll take some calls with the discussion of the Herman Cain, sexual harassment allegations. Whether they're true or not. I mean, most likely they're not true. But whenever you run for president, this is the kind of stuff that happens, or, whenever anything. I remember this stuff happened to Clarence Thomas when he was nominated for a Supreme Court justice. All of a sudden, Anita Hill comes out with these old allegations. And I remember that was a huge thing when he was up for nomination. But the bigger part of the story is this whole idea that we've made it so easy for women in the name of political correctness to allege sexual harassment in the first place, because it's such an easy thing to do, and a lot of times sexual harassment is very subjective, and it's often in the eye of the woman, because some women could feel that a particular comment or particular gesture is harassment, and another woman might actually enjoy it, think it's a compliment, or might not care. So you just never know as a man if you say something that's going to be interpreted by the woman as being something that might make her feel uncomfortable and therefore be able to file some kind of claim. But I think what happens is oftentimes women just file these claims to get some money. You know, people lose their jobs. It's a financial hardship. A quick way to get a little money if you're a woman is simply say sexual harassment. It's easy to do. Not every woman does it. Probably the majority of women don't do it, but there are women that do. And that is a problem. They gave this woman apparently was given $10,000 to sign the settlement. I mean, $10,000 could be hush money. I mean, even if you do nothing wrong and you decide, look, there's no sexual harassment, it's going to cost you more than $10,000 to defend yourself in court. And, of course, there's no guarantee you're going to win. There could be a sympathetic jury that buys the story, even if it's false, and you might end up having to pay even more money. The fact that you settle it for $10,000, the fact that the plaintiff would take such a small amount of money is a general indication that it was a very weak case, and they're happy that they were able to shake it down for $10,000. But, more of the damage that comes from this sexual harassment is that a lot of small businesses, again, are going to look at a female employee and think about a potential sexual harassment suit that may or may not be waiting in the wings if they hire that person. And it simply works against a woman looking to get a job because this adds to the cost of employment. And think about all the companies. They have to go through sensitivity training. They have all these programs. They do all this stuff just to cover their back to try to mitigate the damage that would come if there was a sexual harassment lawsuit. All of this money. Look, do I think that it is good behavior for men to sexually harass female employees? Of course not. I mean, it's very boorish. It's very crude behavior. I don't condone it. But you know what? If somebody is harassing their female employees, they're going to quit, right? They're not going to work there, and they'll work someplace else. And if you're this kind of a guy and you just have a reputation of harassing your employees, then you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. Who's going to want to work in an environment where the boss is just constantly harassing female employees? But when you say, hey, let's ban it, let's make it illegal, let's allow people to sue, now you end up doing a lot more damage than the harassment itself. You actually create a situation where employers have a vested interest to discriminate based on sex, based on a desire to mitigate a sexual harassment. You increase the cost of risks associated with employing people, making it less likely that people are going to employ, because not only is a boss responsible for his own sexual harassment, but if you have a small business and you employ several people, you're responsible for what your male employees might say or do to one of your female employees. So you could be a perfect gentleman with all your female employees, yet still be held financially liable for the actions of one of your male employees. So that just simply makes it dangerous to hire anybody. Hey, how do you limit all this exposure? Just limit the number of people you hire. And think about all the people, looking at, Herman Cain go through this and think, gee, why would I want to expose myself to this type of, a treatment? I just won't hire anybody. I'll just, outsource. I'll just use machines. I'll do whatever I can. We have to realize that employing people is not an easy thing. And here, of course, Herman Cain isn't even the employee. He's employed. See, Herman Cain was working for the Restaurant Association. So here you have a situation where Herman Cain's employer was being held responsible, theoretically, for Herman's conduct. But it's worse when you're the owner of the business. And, again, I'm reading more of this stuff online. There's somebody decided to call me a racist online, and I saw some of his comments going back and forth, because I've said that I believe employers should have the right to discriminate based on race when they hire people. And, it's not because I think that they should or because I'm condoning it. I'm just saying that employers, if you're starting a business and you're writing the paychecks and it's your money that's on the line, you're the one that loses if the business doesn't work out. You get to call the shots. You decide who you want to hire. You decide who you want to fire. And, of course, people are free to choose to work for you or not. If they don't like the work environment that you provide, they can quit. They can go and find a work environment that is more hospitable. And let's say somebody is, a boorish. Let's say I'm a person and I'm constantly sexually harassing my female employees. Maybe I'm going to have to pay them a lot more money to stay and not quit. But, there might be some women that are willing to put up with it. Hey, the guy's a jerk, but he pays me a lot more than anybody else, so I'm gonna stick around and bear it. But then the person who's sexually harassing, he's being punished because he's having to pay more to attract employees. Somebody who's not, doesn't have that type of attitude, hey, maybe they get to hire people for less money. Anyway, we'll be back. I've got more to talk about on this topic. I'll be taking your calls. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. And we are back. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. And, before the break, I mentioned the fact that people online, there's a discussion going on about whether or not I am a racist because I said that I believe entrepreneurs, business owners should be able to discriminate based on race if they so desire. That doesn't make me a racist any more than it makes me a Nazi if I say that Nazis have First Amendment rights. I don't condone what they say if they want to say it. If a businessman wants to discriminate in a way that's irrational, that might undermine the viability of his own business, who am I to get in the way? After all, it's his business. He's the one that's taking the risks. He is the one that is writing the paychecks. But, maybe I should accuse the people who support the laws against racial discrimination of being racists. After all, the consequence of these laws is that businesses that under normal circumstances wouldn't discriminate at all are now discriminating based on race because the government has now given them a financial incentive to do so. If you discriminate based on race, now you're rewarded. The reward is you're less likely to get sued. You have less legal liability. And so the government has taken the disincentive to discriminate and now made an incentive to discriminate, and that is one of the reasons that minorities have such high rates of unemployment. That and things like the minimum wage law and a lot of other occupational licensing laws. The reason that minorities have such a higher level of unemployment, it's all because of government policy. So why don't we call all the liberals racists who are pursuing all these policies that are disproportionately impacting minorities in this country? But one final word, I want to play a little sound this is from Morning Joe. We had a reporter, Jonathan Martin from Politico, who I guess Politico had broke the story about Herman Cain. So they had Jonathan on the Morning Joe asking him about these allegations. So let's listen in cut number 3.
Hey, Jonathan, what are the allegations specifically as you understand them? I mean, there's obviously a wide range in sexual harassment.
Yeah.
What did he do?
Well, we have to be careful about that, obviously, because we're sensitive to the sourcing involved here, and also what actually happened to these women as well. We want to be sensitive to that too. It includes both verbal and physical gestures. These women felt uncomfortable. They were unhappy about their treatment, and they complained to both colleagues and senior officials. In one case, it involved, I think, inviting a woman up to a hotel room of canes on the road, but we're just not going to get into the details of exactly what happened with these women besides what's in the story.
So, really, in other words, think about this. I mean, and this is what has come to in this country. So the women felt uncomfortable because maybe he made a gesture or said something. I mean, who said that that work has to be completely comfortable? I mean, this is nonsense. I think when the sexual harassment law started, it was basically, sexual harassment was, sleep with me or you're fired. Something like that. I mean, but to say that women can never at any point be made to feel uncomfortable. Look, there's a lot of reasons that you get uncomfortable at work, and if your boss says something or your coworker says something that makes you feel uncomfortable, then you say something. You put them in their place. You chew them out. But to say, and if it doesn't stop, you quit. Because you know what? You find a better work environment. But the minute you say, hey, this is somehow actionable, that you have a legal right not to feel uncomfortable, and if anybody makes you feel uncomfortable, whether they intended to or not, you could sue them. And in fact, since the bar is so low for sexual harassment, what prevents somebody from making it up? What if Herman Cain didn't make an offensive gesture. What if someone just said he did? How the fact that it costs so much money to defend yourself, there's really nothing you can do but write a check. And I think that's what he did. I think these two women that made these allegations, I think they were both given relatively small checks, maybe 3 months pay, which, they might have gotten as a severance anyway regarding to. But the government is just getting way too involved in the employment situation. But anyway, let me go. We've got a lot of people who've been waiting on hold. First, I'm going to go back to Casper, who had called from Malaysia. Casper, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for taking my call once more.
Sure.
Peter, first, a quick question. I really enjoyed the show that you had with Tom Woods at the steering wheel a few weeks ago. He's a great stand-in. Don't cancel your holiday.
So you say you'd prefer the Tom Woods show to the Peter Schiff show?
Let's not go there. Peter, by the way, I think a lot of listeners would like to know whether your father actually is able to listen to some of the shows.
No, he doesn't have access to the internet. He's allowed to send some emails through this ridiculous type of system they have, but he can't surf the internet, so he has no ability to listen to my show.
That's a shame. I thought that might be one of the reasons why you decided to do the show in the first place.
Now, if he ever gets out of prison, I'll have him as a guest. But in the meantime, we're just still trying to get him out.
Sure. Peter, I have a couple of questions on the euro. The first question is, a German economist was on Russia Today a week or two ago saying that perhaps the best idea was for Germany to leave the euro, and he's not the only one who said that the Greece and Ireland and Portugal and so forth should stay and pay their debts and dues in the euro, and it was much better that Germany went out and had their own D-mark, which would probably land at
there is no euro without Germany. So if Germany left the euro, there would be no euro.
Well, I don't think that's entirely true. I think there will be a euro of a much, much weaker stature. But why wouldn't there be a euro? I mean,
no. But if Germany went back to the Deutschmark, do you think Austria is not going to stay with the euro without Germany? They're not going to, and then the Netherlands aren't going to stay. I mean, and then as they start dropping out, I mean, who's going to want to be part of the euro when the only countries that are in it are Greece and Portugal? I mean, so without, and of course, Germany never should have gotten into it. I mean, I talked about it at the time that it was a bad deal for Germany, even though a lot of people think that Germany is benefiting from it based on the economy. But look, I think the Germans would be in even better shape. But I mean, I think Germany would have been in even better shape had they not bailed out East Germany. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have absorbed East Germany back to a unified Germany, but the way it was handled, it was completely wrong. East Germany, and so the German citizens have really had to put up with a lot from their politicians,
That's true, but in 1992, I was one of the few conservatives in Denmark who voted no at the Maastricht Treaty for Denmark to join what later became the euro. So I fully agree that Germany shouldn't have been in the first place. But what we're looking at now with Greece and possibly Ireland and Portugal is utter chaos, and pretending that this will just continue is surely not going to happen. Why is it the law of nature that the weakest are dropping out instead of Germany leaving?
Yeah, well, as I said, I don't think Germany is going to leave, but Greece might leave. And that might be a positive. It's not going to be good for Greece if they leave on their, see, if Greece defaulted, right, and had a real restructuring, that would be fine. But if Greece leaves the euro and tries to preserve this massive government state, and it just resurrects the drachma, it's going to be horrible for Greece, and it'll serve as an example to other countries that not to take that road of just massive inflation, because that's the only way the Greeks could try to sustain this massive a welfare state is through inflation.
That's an example we need, by the way. Going on to my second question and last question, if one of the weaker euro members leaves the euro, which you seem to think is more likely outcome, how is their new or old currency, how is that one going to be valued? How can you determine?
I have no idea. I mean, obviously, if you have euros on deposit in a bank outside of Greece, you're okay. Probably what they would do is if you have any euros sitting in a Greek bank account, they would turn that into drachma. And if you own any debt denominated in euros, they would repay it in drachma, or more likely they would just default on it. But, you know, all the contracts in Greece would be rewritten. If you owed somebody euros, you would pay them drachma. I mean, it would. But if you have your money out of Greece, I guess it wouldn't be affected. Anyway, hey, we will be back. We got a lot more coming up here on the Peter Schiff Show. We got more calls to take. Stick around. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com. We're back. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. We are taking phone calls, 855-4-SCHIFF. A lot to talk about. If you've got something to say, give us a call. Next up is Peter calling from Queens, New York. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and I just wanted to share a story of mine between me and my brother. Like, we own a chain of gift shops throughout Queens and Brooklyn. And, one of the stores he had, right, was underperforming, and he was paying the rent, the electricity, and the payroll out of, his other profiting stores. Mm-hmm. And the city said that the sales tax for that particular store was too low, so they sent auditors down. When the auditors came, to watch the register to see if he was not making
by too low, you mean they didn't think you had paid enough in taxes based on what they thought the sales volume should have been, or? Right,
because they said he was cheating on the sales tax receipts. So, when the auditors came in, they sent two guys in to, just sit in the store all day to watch the register. One of them, after 4 or 5 hours, they said, you know what, he's really not making the money he says he's not making. And then the other guy was like, well, no, you know what, I've been sitting here on my fat butt here for 5 hours. I got to get some money out of this guy. So on top of his losses of just, hemorrhaging money on this store, he had to pay like a huge fine for sales tax fraud.
But they didn't have any proof there was sales tax fraud?
No, one guy said, you know what, I think he's not making the money he's not making. So to put salt on the wound, he had to pay the fine. So we closed that store. We fired everybody there, and like any store that's breaking even or not making money, we closed them all up. Like, especially if we didn't own the building.
Because if they can just come in and allege that you didn't pay enough in sales taxes, because they're claiming that you had sales that you didn't have. Right.
And they sent the auditors, and the guy sat there for 5 hours and realized, the market and the block, it was just dead. And it's like, everywhere in Queens and Brooklyn, because I do wholesale. I used to do wholesale, but after that incident, I just started shutting all my stores down. And, you could see, like, there's a lot of empty stores. And, and I'm betting that they closed down the shops for the reason we closed down our shops. And, when we were working, like, 10 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, we used to buy, like, low-key cars. We never bought expensive Mercedes or BMWs. And, now that we closed up, we stopped importing stuff. We closed our
How many employees did you have?
I don't know. At the warehouse, we employed anywhere between 20 or 30 people. Each store had like a crew of 4 to 8, depending.
Ever get any lawsuits? Any of your employees sue or?
No, they all understood. A lot of them were like relatives. Like my cousin and my nephew, they moved back to China. They were in the middle of getting their citizenship, and they decided to just leave the country and go back to China. And they gave up, pursuing.
Yeah, probably better chance of finding a job over there.
Well, my cousin's making money hand over fist, and he wants me to come over and, and just go to the U.S. Embassy and just ditch my U.S. citizenship. But,
what's he doing in China?
What kind of work? He's kind of trading stocks like I am. And that's what happened to me. I'm home right now. I'm trading stocks. Like, I just made a shitload of money. Sorry. I made money. On gold this morning. On the gap close. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, the government taxed you out of business, and so now all you can do is speculate for a living. Anyway, hey.
And I don't need to be in a...
Yeah, I know. Well, at least you're listening to the Peter Schiff Show now. But anyway, hey, thanks for the call. Yeah, the government just doesn't stop getting involved. The rules, I've talked about all the rules and regulations, all the problems we've had, with rules and regulations. But here's one I haven't really discussed. I'll bring it up. I used to employ not that many brokers, maybe 4 or 5 brokers out of my whole workforce that didn't work full time at an actual office because they just couldn't drive. They lived too far away from one of my 6 offices, so they would do most of their work off-site, and we would supervise them, and we would follow all the rules of supervision for somebody that was working predominantly from a home-based office. They would also come to the actual office quite often. But they worked, the bulk of their time And this used to be pretty common in the brokerage industry for brokers to work from home, especially since, computers, telephones, internet. That makes it very easy for people to telecommute, and some people have circumstances. But the rules had gotten to the point where we had to ban that practice. We had to require all of our brokers to work 100% of their time in one of my offices. And so basically all of the people who had worked predominantly from their homes ended up quitting because they really couldn't do it. It just didn't work. The last one who had been hanging in there, who was driving, I think, 2 hours a day, commuting to the Scottsdale office, he finally quit yesterday. And basically the bottom line is, here is the government forcing somebody to drive 2 hours a day back and forth. Now, he couldn't move for personal reasons. His wife was in a law practice. She couldn't move. But, if I'm as a business owner, if I make a decision that I'm comfortable with an employee working mainly from his home, if I feel that I can supervise them and that it works, it should be my call. But it really wasn't my call. Basically, we were forced by security regulations. But again, this is how regulations come in and how many jobs are now destroyed. I mean, I can employ quite a few people who could work part-time, who could work from their homes, but I'm not allowed to do that. If you want to work for me, according to regulations, you have to be in a desk at my office 100% of the time. Now, obviously, there are some sales brokers that, you spend some time on the road, right? You make an appointment. Maybe you go and you get in your car and you meet a prospect or you meet a client at their house or for lunch. That's okay, but your base of operation has to be the office. You got to come, you can still go out on appointments, but who knows? Maybe one day that won't be allowed either. Maybe one day we're going to have to force all the clients to come meet with us on the premises where we can videotape and record every word that's said. Who knows? Maybe one day we're going to have to bug our employees. Maybe we're going to have install video cameras in their houses. The way the regulations are making you responsible. But the whole thing is ridiculous. The government just gets involved, destroys businesses, runs up the cost of doing businesses, tries to micromanage everybody's business. It puts all these levels of cost, regulation, uncertainty. It's a wonder that there's anybody still employing anybody in this country. Anyway, let me go back to the telephones. Next up is Rick calling from Pensacola, Florida. Rick, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you, Peter. First of all, I wanted to say what a great show you have. I mean, I've been listening to talk radio for 20 years, and there's no place you can get the kind of information that we get from you when you're the host. Tom Woods was a fantastic substitute, but there's a lot of useful information that you only can get from you. Great show. I wanted to reference back to yesterday's Ayn Rand show and suggest that people who investors, employers who feel like they'd like to participate in a strike for all the abuse that they take in terms of taxation in particular and regulation, et cetera. I was wondering if you thought maybe the ultimate way to participate in a Ayn Rand type strike would be to invest in gold bullion, because ultimately you're protecting yourself against the possibility of, or the probability, I should say, of debasing the currency. But also, you're saying, I'm not going to participate in the constant confiscation of dividends and capital gains.
Well, yeah, obviously, the U.S. economy would be better off if so many people weren't buying gold. I mean, I understand that, right? I understand the fact that when I'm telling someone to buy gold, that doesn't grow the economy. Now, I think in the long run it's good, because when the economy crashes and burns, it's going to be good that some Americans have some gold to help rebuild it. But right now, right, what you need is investment. We need more tools. We need more factories. We need people investing. The reason that they're not investing, the reason that I don't encourage people to invest in American enterprises is because I realize that they're going to lose money, because the government is rendering those investments non-profitable. The government is making so much harder to make a profit, and then confiscating such a big chunk of it, if you do, that it doesn't make any sense. Again, look at how low interest rates are. Why would you loan somebody money in America when inflation is just going to destroy the value of the loan. I mean, you're not going to do it. So, yeah, the government has already put, investors on strike in a way, in that they're investing abroad instead, or they're not investing at all. They're just storing their wealth in precious metals, hoping to survive the storm. So none of this is good. But, the strike, the Ayn Rand type strike is, when the people who are running the businesses just say enough is enough, I quit. There are a lot of people who are running businesses who, they don't need the money anymore. A lot of them, they're doing it for the personal satisfaction. They enjoy it. And if the government is going to punish them and vilify them, there are plenty of people who might say, I'm done. Just sell the business, maybe sell off your assets to some foreign competitor, and just relax and enjoy your life. Go fishing, play golf. The people that would be hurt the most from that scenario are the employees that now don't have jobs, are the customers that now have to look for their next best option. Maybe now prices are higher because the business is no longer there. So, and of course, the government now gets no tax revenue, because the minute you retire and don't generate any more income, you really don't pay a lot of taxes. You just pay sales taxes, but you don't pay a lot of taxes to the federal government anymore until you die, and then they get the inheritance tax. But if you simply spend all the money before you die, the government gets nothing. And so, if they leave you in business, everybody gets money. The employees get more money, the customers benefit, the government gets more money. So if we had that kind of strike, and, part of me would like to see that happen, because you get so disgusted. Everybody wants to, vilify these businessmen and say you have to do more, you have to do more. Hey, we'd really find out just how much they do if they stop doing it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for your part in getting the word out.
And thanks for your call, and thanks for your comments, your compliments about the show. Appreciate getting some positive feedback. Like to know I'm making a difference and doing a good job here, as a talk show host. Anyway, we will be right back. We got another another segment coming up on the Peter Schiff Show here on SchiffRadio.com. Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. We are at the final segment of the show, and I want to play some quick segment here. This is from CNN. On the Howard Kurtz show with another political reporter, again, playing the race card, trying to paint Republicans as being racist. Here we are, cut number 7.
Can I just say one more thing about the birther issue? It's not a fun issue to poke somebody on. It is more than a little bit racist. It grew, not everyone who believes it is a racist, but it grew out of the belief that a black man could not be legitimately elected to the president of the United States. Now, why would Perry use that in the primaries instead of saving it for the general when he's running against President Obama? Well, it's because being extreme, perhaps, and a little bit racist, perhaps, gives you good bona fides in a Republican primary. It shows them you're on the same side as they are.
So, again, the birther issue is because Saddam Hussein not because Barack Obama is black. I don't think it's because he's black. I mean, I think people don't like his policies and they're looking for anything to hang their hat on. I mean, remember when the Clintons the rumors were that Hillary and Bill killed Vince Foster. I mean, they were white. If Hillary and Bill were black, I suppose they would say that the reason that they had these rumors was because they were racist. It's not, they don't like his policies. And I think there were some articles that circulated from a Kenyan newspaper at some point or a store that kind of got the ball rolling. But I think maybe, if anything, one of the reasons that people might think that that President Obama wasn't born here is just his name, right? It's Barack Hussein Obama. I mean, it sounds, there's all these foreign words in there. That might have more to do with why people might have been thought he was born in Kenya or Indonesia or someplace like that, because his name is Barack Hussein Obama. In fact, the thing is, the fact that he was able to even get elected with that name, would have to show that the public is not racist at all. After all, right? His name is almost a combination. It sounds like Osama, right? Obama sounds like Osama from Osama bin Laden. And his middle name is Hussein, just like Saddam Hussein. So he's a combination of our two arch enemies, names put together. The thought of that, the fact that he was even able to get elected. Imagine a guy, who had a combination of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini or Joseph Stalin, somebody with a name, you combine them together and getting elected president at the end of World War II. I mean, that would, but it happened. And so I think the fact that so many Americans voted for him, obviously, that should be example that we're not a racist society. But the Democrats want to continue to say that all of this is based on race. It's not. It's based on politics. And, of course, there's always these crazy rumors circulating around all candidates, regardless of their race. I mean, and people believe this stuff. There's always a small segment because, of course, there are people out there that believe that they were abducted by aliens. There are people out there that believe Elvis Presley is still alive. People believe all kinds of crazy things, but it has nothing to do with the fact that President Obama happens to be black. Anyway, let me go back to the phones. Brett online in Connecticut. Brett, welcome to the show.
Hi, Peter. My name's Brett. I'm from Colchester. I have a question about auditing, and I'm a sophomore student at University of Connecticut, accounting student. My observations is with at least about auditing is well, despite the depth and the breadth of these extensive audits, that they failed to prevent some fraudulent transactions, like you saw with the Lehman Brothers. There was this Repo 105, a repurchase agreement that was very unconventional, and they missed the cue there to prevent that, and it's a tremendous cost on firms. But I understand that auditing is I think it's a very necessary part for financial reporting standards, and I was just wondering what your thoughts are on making the system more effective and more cost efficient on firms.
Which system?
Financial auditing, just in general.
But financial auditing of who?
Just public businesses that are on the market, and they have to be subjected to these audits. How could this be more of an efficient or effective system? How could
I think that the exchanges. See, I think that the exchanges should be required. I don't think the government has to necessarily require that. I think if you're going to be a publicly listed company on a particular exchange, whether it's a New York Stock Exchange or the American Stock Exchange, the exchange itself, as part of its requirements for listing, is going to require public disclosure. And that's not something that the government has to demand. And, of course, if you're a shareholder, if you're going to invest in a company, you're not going to invest in a company unless there's financial disclosure. So I think anybody who's going to be holding shares that are publicly traded and who is trying to solicit investors is going to have audited financial statements. Now, I have audited financial statements because the security regulators require me to do that. If it wasn't for that, see, I don't have any investors. I own my company outright. I don't have any shareholders, so I'm not accountable to anybody. I mean, I'm accountable to my customers, but their funds are segregated. Even if my company were to go bankrupt, right? My customer money is not at risk because the customer money isn't with me; it's with a clearing firm. But I'm still required by security laws to pay an outside auditor to audit my company every year. To satisfy the security industry that exists because of government requirements, but I don't see any real necessity to do that. It doesn't. It just drives up the cost of doing business for me. But if I was trying to get investors, if I was trying to go public and be listed on an exchange, then I would think that it would make sense for me to have these audited reports, because then I would be trying to get investors. And if investors are going to be my partners and be in business with me, they want to see the books. I mean, you're not going to invest in a company unless you see what's going on with the money. You got to make sure you're not getting screwed. But if you've got no outside investors, there really is no legitimate reason for these audits. But I don't think I don't think the government should be telling a private company, hey, you need to be audited. By some independent auditor, and you've got to absorb the cost when the business owner sees no real advantage to do that. If you want to access the capital markets, if you want to get investors, there's a financial need. There's an advantage to having an independent audit because it helps you raise money. Without that audit, you might not be able to raise any money. Nobody would want to invest.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree that auditing is a necessity, especially if you're going to be listed on the capital markets, because that enhances investor confidence once they see your reports and there's the auditor's statement. I guess what I was trying to get at more is, do you feel like the regulations that the government set with Sarbanes-Oxley, do you feel like Do you feel like
No, I think Sarbanes-Oxley is doing a lot more harm than good. A lot of companies that were abroad have just refused to list their shares here because of Sarbanes-Oxley. Look, that entire bill needs to be repealed along with Dodd-Frank. In fact, that's part of Ron Paul's campaign promise is to repeal Sarbanes-Oxley along with Dodd-Frank. But anyway, we have come to the end of the show. The market's, making new lows. As I said, the Dow now better than 300 points. We will be back again tomorrow and pick up the drama on the Peter Schiff Show here at SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio. Bye for now.